Welcome to another Quran study. God willing, today we'll be reading from Surah 21, verse 55. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Excuse me. They said, "Are you telling us the truth or are you playing?" He said, "Your Lord, your only Lord, is the Lord of the heavens and the earth, who created them. This is the testimony to which I bear witness. I swear by God, I have a plan to deal with your statues as soon as you leave." He broke them into pieces, except for a big one, that they may refer to it. They said, "Whoever did this to our gods is really a transgressor." They said, "We heard a youth threaten them. He is called Abraham." They said, "Bring him before the eyes of all the people, that they may bear witness." They said, "Did you do this to our gods, O Abraham?" Abraham proves his point. He said, "It is that big one who did it. Go ask them if they can speak." They were taken aback and said to themselves, "Indeed, you are the ones who have been transgressing." Yet they reverted to their old ideas. "You know full well that these cannot speak." He said, "Do you then worship beside God what possesses no power to benefit you or harm you? You have incurred shame by worshiping idols beside God. Do you not understand?" They said, the profound miracle, they said, "Burn him and support your gods if this is what you decide to do." We said, "O fire, be cool and safe for Abraham." Thus they schemed against him, but we made them the losers. We saved him, and we saved Lot to the land that we blessed for all the people. And we granted him Isaac and Jacob as a gift, and we made them both righteous. MashaAllah. So these are verses about Abraham's debate with the people that were with Abraham. And God says that earlier in the surah, it talks about why God chose Abraham, right? And God chose Abraham because he was appreciative, because God knew that he was appreciative, and this is why in another verse God tells us. And so God says that Abraham was never an idol worshiper. He was always a monotheist submitter. And so in this passage from this chapter, we can see him debating with these people, and these people were mocking him, and were even like hostile towards him. But in this scenario, like what we see is that Abraham was very wise, and that he used his wisdom to debate with them in a way, kind of mock them in a way, but use that example to basically teach them. Like a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people will look at this example and say, well, didn't Abraham just transgress because he broke their idols? And you're not supposed to insult or curse their idols, God says in the Quran. So first of all, God says you do not curse their idols, and you breaking an idol, for example, to prove a point, you're not cursing idols. Cursing would be like you're saying bad things about an idol. And you can use bad words, or you can literally curse them. But breaking an idol doesn't equate to, first of all, cursing the idols, right? And then he wasn't just breaking the idols to be violent. We know, like for example, there's a famous story about about the Taliban in Afghanistan, that they were like thousands of years old of statues they had, like a lot of historical stuff from the past, like from thousands of years, and they big statues of Buddha and stuff, and then they broke all of them, and I think it was basically linked to this verse that they said Abraham broke the idols, and you have to break the idols. And then Jews, I think they also believe that if they invade like a country where they have idols, like Jesus, for example, like they have to break those idols, in the churches and whatnot. But here, obviously, God is not telling us to do that. But in his case, he wanted to prove a point. He's like, okay, let me, if I destroy all these small gods and leave the big one, and then they come, he planned this whole thing in his head. So he's like, okay, if I leave this big one here and I break these ones, the big one, even the strongest one, apparently among them, if he's big, like, it may have a significance, like why this one's so big, But if you leave this big one here, maybe they will think about it, like how even the biggest idol could not protect this, even the smallest ones, and so that's what he debated. And when he debated with them, based on the verse, we can see that they actually were stumped, because they said, they said that basically in their hearts, it says they were taken aback and said to themselves, "Indeed, you are the ones who have been transgressing." So it was made evident to them that they were the ones who were transgressing, but they still continued to do that, yet they reverted to their old ideas, right? So it shows that, people are not completely stupid in that sense. Like, they also can realize that what they're doing is nonsense. And, for example, people who idolize Muhammad or Jesus, there's part of their brains where they can reason, a compartment in their mind somewhere where they can, when you talk to them, like it may click in the head, but they still will, just because they're evil, they're still going to push it away. And that's what these people did, and revert to their old ideas, and to the point that they wanted to burn him, right? And then God talks about the profound miracle that God told the fire to be cool and safe for Abraham, and so I think that is a very profound lesson for us here. One, it shows to us that God controls everything, and then it also shows us that God can turn the most hostile situations in your favor if you're on God's side, right? Because God controlled even the fire, like every atom in the fire, because Abraham was with God and God wanted to protect him, even though he was physically inside the fire, that even though the physical properties of the fire are to burn the person, once they are in it, like God says, as the messenger says, you put your finger in the fire, it's going to burn. And it's not like you want to put your finger in the fire, like, and you're gonna tell yourself, no, God is gonna save me, so if I put my finger in it now. So, but Abraham didn't do that. He didn't choose to go in the fire. He didn't do it on purpose. He was actually thrown in the fire, by other people. So it's possible that if a true believer in God is actually thrown in the fire by his opponents, if God wants to set a precedent out of it, or to save this person by any means, God will save that person, right? So this also shows to us how profound we should trust in God. And that also shows like how much trust Abraham had in God, that even though this happened, like God came to his rescue and saved him from the situation. And then the footnote for this verse says, cool without safe would have caused Abraham to freeze. So God told the fire to be cool and safe for Abraham. So while it was cool, it wasn't cool to the point where Abraham would freeze, right? And this shows like, how everything submits to God, and the entire earth with fire and everything else is a submitter to God. And, if God didn't tell the fire to be safe, it could freeze Abraham. So on for 2173, God willing, there's another footnote, but I can read that afterwards actually. And then God says that we saved him and we saved Lot to the land that we blessed for all the people. And so God saved them as a reward, and God blessed uh, that land for all the people at the time, right? And God says He granted him Isaac and Jacob as a gift and made both of them righteous, right? And so we can see that because, God says in another verse that, he disowned his father, whom I believe, he had, close ties with as well, right? Like, most other children would probably, he still disowned him. And God saw that sacrifice as well, and the test he went through. And as a reward for passing that test, God granted him two righteous children, and both of them, God says He made them righteous, and we know both of them were messengers from God. Verse 73: Abraham delivered all religious duties of Islam. We made them imams who guided in accordance with our commandments, and we taught them how to work righteousness and how to observe the contact prayer salat and the obligatory charity zakat. To us they were devoted worshippers. And the footnote says, when the Quran was revealed, all religious duties were already established through Abraham. And then you can see 2:128, 16:123, and 22:78 for reference. So, this has been mentioned throughout the Quran. Yes, you have the Mohammedans and so many other people who think that Quran was given to Abraham, right? And that the religious duties were not given to Abraham, that they were given to Muhammad, even though we know that the only thing that was given to Muhammad was the Quran, but all the religious practices were already intact, were already established at the time that the Quran was revealed, and that's why God didn't mention, for example, the details on how to do the contact prayer. And so this is a big misconception that many people have, even though, these people read the Quran all the time, right? And God talks about the contact prayers, and yet they think all this nonsense. We've talked about this in the past, but you know how they say that Moses was the one who kept telling Muhammad when he went to the high heaven to receive the contact prayers, right? Muhammad went to the high heaven to basically receive the Quran, right? The highest point, that he could go to receive the Quran. He didn't go to receive the contact prayer, but yet there's hadith, obviously, which are all lies. It says that he went there to, and God gave him the contact prayers, and it was like 100 prayers at first, and then, he came and told Moses that God told him that, and then Moses said, no, go back and try to haggle with God, to make it less, and then, I don't know, it turns like 50, and then he goes, no, he comes down and say, oh, he said 50, and then Moses says, no, go get a lesser, and then he talks, Muhammad tells God to make the prayers, to limit them to 5 times a day, So I don't know, they do it to maybe convince each other that, it could be 100, thank God it's only 5 or what, but, it's just the whole thing is completely made up and fabricated. And all the religious duties, including the 5 daily contact prayers, were given to Abraham, and when Muhammad was given the Quran, those 5 daily contact prayers were already established, and people were doing them. So God willing, I continue reading verse 74, Lot. It says, as for Lot, we granted him wisdom and knowledge, and we saved him from the community that practiced abominations. They were wicked and evil people. We admitted him into our mercy, for he was righteous. So God says about Lot here that God granted him wisdom and knowledge and saved him from a community that practiced abominations, right? So it's important to remember here that homosexuality, we know that they practice homosexuality, they practice sex with the men instead of the women, and God calls it an abomination, right? So yet you have these people that are going around and saying all this nonsense about God, attributing lies to God and attributing bad things to God. We know nothing bad comes from God, and they blame God for creating them homosexuals. So saying that God made them this way, and then what they're doing or thinking or fantasizing, is completely okay. And this is an idea that I first saw came from Mustard Tucson when one of the people there, who was at the time of the messenger also there, after the messenger passed away, decided to write a book, and then she decided to talk about lesbians. Like the book was, strangely, the book was titled "Role of Women in Islam," right? Okay, and then she's like interviewing these women, and then there's like this woman, and she's lesbian, right? And then for some reason, like, how is this connected to the role of women in Islam? Like, what are you trying to prove, first of all, right? By interviewing someone who's a lesbian, and then you think that even though God calls it an abomination, and God has the entire account of Lot, how this entire community was annihilated, you want to glorify her and introduce her into the book. Who she's nobody, right? And you're introducing her into the book as a homosexual who represents submission, and saying that you can have these types of thoughts. And then not only that, one person writes a book, you can close the book and forget about it, right? Like, must say you're Mustard Tucson. But this book was then, excerpt from the book was also put out in their submitters' perspective, which was shipped to submitters around the world, right? So you can see the damage that this, and that perspective, some people pay for it, but if you don't pay for it, they send it out to you free. They blast it out in the emails to all the submitters that they are aware of, and it's appalling, and it's ridiculous. And I mean, I don't have the words to explain like the kind of irresponsibility and disservice that it is to submission, because now we're seeing people who are upholding these ideas, and they think that it's okay to be homosexual, right? Even though God calls it an abomination, God says that these people were annihilated, God says it's evil, and because this literature has been promoted by these people, that you have these people that now think, like young people that think this is okay and acceptable in submission. And I mean, you have a bunch of people now, right? Like 2 years ago, I came across one person, and now we came across another person, and apparently that person knows a bunch of other people that believe that way. So now it's like part of the submitters. Some people believe it's okay, which is like beyond me, at least. Like, how could you do that, and how could you think that way? Like, when you have such clear commandments from the Quran. But obviously, Satan has misled them. Obviously, God wants these types of people. First they introduce circumcision into religion, and we see the damage that did. And then this thing also, I think, is slowly surfacing, and I guess it's probably gonna get worse. And so, now this thing there, and God knows what else is coming, right? But, this is very clear to us when we read in the Quran that homosexuality is a sin. It's an abomination. God says it's being, really unappreciative and evil, to the point that a community is being annihilated, right? So you can see, like, there's nothing okay about it, right? And God doesn't create people as homosexuals. There are these few, scientists, whoever. I mean, all these people were just human beings, right? And they came up with these theories that God, created homosexuality, and they had no actual evidence to prove that. Up until now, in 2026, there's no evidence to support that homosexuality is, connected to someone's genes or anything like that, right? Because people are also saying, for example, pedophiles are also born as pedophiles, right? And then they're justifying with the same ideologies, and it's so hard to talk these people out of it, because there are these bogus, satanic studies that people have put out, to promote their ideas, basically. I mean, look at it now. I mean, what these people are, they have no ethics. For example, now people know about things like the Epstein files and Jeffrey Epstein. And Jeffrey Epstein, for example, he had ties to people at Harvard University and other places. They were in research departments with professors, like head of the entire universities and president of Harvard. Like all the way. So these people then carry out research studies, and then they finance those studies, and the goal of these studies is to prove these things, and then they bias their studies in this way. Like even now, even though that idea that you can be born gay, and they said they would discover the gay genes, even though after a long time that was also proven false, they still have ideas that no, it's not just genes, maybe it's genes and a combination of other things like your hormones and other hormones and other people's hormones and stuff. But they still want to cling to that idea that God created this thing, right? And the same was with circumcision, right? They used these fake studies to promote this multi-billion-dollar industry of selling foreskins to beauty companies and all these other, God knows who else was using that to create studies to try to make people believe that it can prevent AIDS, which is ridiculous and laughable, just for someone who's not even a scientist, right? To understand that if anything, it would expose you to more diseases and stuff, and creating a bogus study, one bogus study, and then blasting it to all the major news networks, and then to other people, right? And so this is another way, that they found, to promote falsehood, is to go through the so-called scientists, right? And I mean, there's nothing against scientists. We're all about science, right? But people have to understand that if a scientist comes or a doctor comes and tells you to disobey God, or tells you something about God, you have the Quran, you have the scientific, mathematically proven scripture that you can use to reference, right? If someone comes to you with a bogus idea, God tells us to uphold the Quran alone as our source of guidance, right? How are you upholding the Quran as a source of guidance if the Quran is telling you that homosexuality is an abomination, it's a sin, you annihilate a community, and then you say, no, but these scientists are saying this and this, Or if you say, no, but the CDC is saying that circumcision is good for you, it's beneficial, etc., and it prevents diseases, right? You have the Quran, all right? So we should go by the Quran, because there's nothing more scientific than the Quran, and there's nothing more proven than the Quran. The Quran is mathematically proven. The idea about the gay genes is not mathematically proven, and so is the circumcision, for example, right? And these are just two things that come to my mind when we talk about this, right? But just on this idea of homosexuality, I mean, there's so much nonsense that people have spread, based on these lies that they have promoted, and nobody should have the right to, call themselves. So they can call themselves whatever they want, really. Like you have Muslims all over the world; they call themselves Muslims, right? But just by you calling yourself a Muslim doesn't make you a Muslim. A Muslim is a person who submits to the will of God alone. And someone who calls himself a lesbian submitter or a gay submitter or a bisexual, whatever submitter, doesn't make them a submitter. You can put submitter at the end, you can put submitter as your last name, but that does not make you a submitter when you are upholding these types of ideas and trying to even promote them to other people. So God willing, I'll continue reading verse 76, Noah. And it says, and before that, Noah called and we responded to him. We saved him and his family from the great disaster. We supported him against the people who rejected our revelations. They were evil people, so we drowned them all. Right? So we can see here also the people of Noah, God says he annihilated them. And God says they were evil people, so we drowned them all. So they weren't like born evil, right? They were people that were evil. They turned evil and on their own volition, and God drowned them. Same as the story of Lot as we see here, right before that. David and Solomon, verse 78. And David and Solomon, when they once ruled with regard to someone's crop that was destroyed by another's sheep, we witnessed their judgment. We granted Solomon the correct understanding, though we endowed both of them with wisdom and knowledge. We committed the mountains to serve David in glorifying God, as well as the birds. This is what we did. And we taught him the skill of making shields to protect you in war. Are you then thankful? For Solomon, we committed the wind, gusting and blowing at his disposal. He could direct it as he wished to whichever land he chose, and we blessed such land for him. We are fully aware of all things. And of the devils, there were those who would die for him to harvest the sea, or do whatever else he commanded them to do. We committed them in his service. So these verses, talking about David and Solomon, have a lot of valuable lessons for us to learn from. One, we see that, these two, father and son, were, God, made them rulers on earth, and granted them authority. And God says, in one particular matter, God says, we granted Solomon the correct understanding, even though we bestowed both of them with wisdom and knowledge. So you have a situation, you have a father and a son, and in this situation, the son is given a better understanding than the father, right? So, when people talk about, a parent-child relationship, you can't automatically assume that the parent is more wise than the child because the child is younger. Because wisdom, maturity comes with age, right? But wisdom comes from God, and guidance comes from God. And if God wants to grant it to someone, even though they might be young, God can do that. And we see that from Abraham too. He was wise from a very young age as well, and so were the other messengers. And in this case, God says He granted Solomon the correct understanding, even though God gave both of them wisdom and knowledge. And this is about, in response to the 99 versus one sheep. And God, shows to us, how careful He was. God says, we committed the mountains to serve David in glorifying God, as well as the birds. This is what we did. So God says He committed the mountains and the birds to serve David in glorifying God, right? And so, even though we don't have the full details on how the mountains and the birds were, subdued in David's service to glorify God, we understand that, this is something that God has bestowed upon him. We also understand that the mountains, just like the birds, are creatures that God has created, and this is why He says that we committed the mountains to serve Him too. And there are other references to mountains, which are described just like other creatures. And then God says He taught him the skill of making shields to protect you in war, which is talking about David, right? And He taught him the skill of making shields to protect him in war. So so basically the skill of making shields is something that started with David, and then we can see how they were able to defend themselves and progress, and so this idea, I actually want to take it one step further. God says He taught him the skill of making shields, right? So just because someone has a shield, an armor, it's a blessing from God. It doesn't mean that you don't trust in God, right? But if you're going in a battle, you can't say, well, don't put on your armor or your shield because God will protect you. Of course, God protects you, but God gives these things to us as blessings so we can use them, right? And people confuse the idea of insurance with this, because in insurance, They also use insurance as a protection, but the insurance as a protection is used to rescue them from a disaster, a bad thing that will happen to them, right? But in the case of you having a shield, the bad thing will not happen to you. Person will try to attack you, but the shield will stop it, right? But you can't say the same for insurance. If you're gonna get into a crash, insurance cannot prevent the crash from happening. Insurance cannot prevent you from getting hurt, right? But they say, well, insurance can take the financial damage, if you get hurt. But if you don't get hurt, you're just gonna keep losing money. So it's like you're gambling and you're betting against yourself. That when this thing happens, and it's only a matter of time because you don't trust in God that you're gonna be in His protection. That when this happens, you're gonna cash in on it and save a lot of money, because otherwise you'd have to pay for healthcare, right? And it's such a test for people in the United States, at least, because the cost of healthcare is so high, and most people fall prey to it. But mashallah, many submitters, have been very strong about it, and they don't have insurance, and God shows, it protects them. And you have cases where people don't trust in God, and they end up getting insurance, and then they end up getting cancer or something, and then they end up dying miserably, and the insurance pays for it, right? But they end up suffering. If they don't get the insurance in the first place, maybe God will protect them, and they wouldn't have to die such a miserable death with excruciating pain, where they do these biopsies and all these things, and to make the cancer even worse, and they put the people under all these chemotherapies and expensive drug therapies. That I remember one guy that came to submission. He already had cancer, and I don't know the entire thing, but he came with the cancer, and then he became a submitter thinking that maybe God would heal him this way. I don't know. And then he ended up dying from cancer, and he was getting all this chemo, and his head became huge. I never saw it, but from other people I heard that this is what happened. I never went to see him, unfortunately, but apparently that's how he died, right? And another person actually I knew that was a chiropractor, and I never suspected anything of him. I thought he was a good submitter. He'd always show up to the Quran studies. And then he decided to get health insurance at some point. And then right after that, he got cancer. And he couldn't do anything. And people were going to him and begging him to cancel his insurance so that he could be saved. And he didn't want to cancel insurance. I don't know if you even convinced him at that point to cancel his insurance, if that would be accepted. It's probably already too late for him anyways. But it's good that God shows us these signs, and also other people that we see. There are a lot of people. Speaking of insurance, a lot of people who have this idea, and we see them getting these serious diseases, and then eventually dying from them. So also people who attribute lies to God, with circumcision and all these things. All those people eventually get it. And we see that and God says, if you're alive, you will see it, right? And so similarly, the person who came up with the idea about circumcision, he ended up also dying of cancer, colon cancer, which God is the one cancer that's mentioned in the Quran in the appendix by the messenger, that says, you go to the bathroom, you do your ablution, you're never going to get it. And he got colon cancer, and then he died from that, right? And then we were talking about homosexuality. So the person, who has been promoting this, after that, she cannot even walk. She's on wheelchair now, and God knows what was coming for her. We can see the fruits of, so to speak, for lack of a better term, of the things that they have promoted, and they get their retribution in this world. Anyways, I kind of digressed, but going back to the verses, actually, to Solomon, God says, we committed the wind gusting and blowing at his disposal, right? And so this is amazing because God gave Solomon so much from his blessings, and tested him with them, because if someone's given a little bit of power, We can see like how easily it goes to their heads, and how they become preoccupied with this world, and how difficult it is to not be like that, right? But God gave Solomon as a test also, right? As a blessing, but also as a test, all of these things, immense wealth, immense control, of wherever he wanted, he could direct the winds at his disposal, right? So imagine if a country or a leader had this type of power alone, like just the thing with the winds, right? I mean, they could be the richest person in the world just from that, right? They could get lands that are barren, and drive the winds there, drive the clouds to that land, and just grow lots of crops, grow whatever they want. And so he was so wealthy. Like in today's figures, like you can't even calculate how wealthy he was. He was more wealthy than anybody else. Even having a number in your bank account doesn't make you wealthy. We know that, right? Even though you have people now who have billions of dollars, but they're still, cash poor, right? They still want more cash, and they're just borrowing money and inflating their numbers and borrowing more money, and they're dependent on people for so many things, right? But we have, example of Solomon where he didn't have to deal with the banks, for example. He didn't have to please anybody, he didn't have to keep his numbers going, or he wasn't waiting for people's votes to stay popular, etc. And he was independent, and then he had all of these blessings, and then God on top of that, God had the jinns that were at his service, building and diving for him, that would go anywhere and bring them anything. So it's like you have no limitations. When you have the jinns at your service, you have no limitations of physical power, like how much stuff you can like physical strength. When it comes to physical strength, right? I mean, these jinns could go to the bottom of the ocean and could extract any minerals or anything that he wanted, right? He had the first oil field, for Solomon, and imagine like they could dig anywhere on earth and get any minerals, any jewels, that they wanted, right? So imagine like the amount of wealth. Nobody can ever, I think, even come close to like this kind of kingship that God had given Solomon, right? And the treasures that God had given him. All the treasures of the earth you can think of, the jinns can go and get them, And on top of that, like, you can think of the surveillance of, any, like the most richest country in the world, and his surveillance powers were bigger than any of them, right? Like, for example, he could send the birds to places. Birds can travel hundreds or sometimes even thousands of miles, like when they migrate, for example, and they can go and bring him information that otherwise you can't get. For example, like today, even a country like United States, with the most powerful army in the world, cannot go to any country they want and any place they want and do surveillance or get information from of another person, unless they really I don't know, like plan extensively. But even then, there are limitations, physical limitations, right? But imagine he could even communicate with the ants, right? Ants, we never hear ants, right? We don't hear them, but they communicate with like pheromones and chemical signals, and Solomon could even understand that, right? So all these things were given to him. These jinns were against their will, subdued for him, right? God taught him how to subdue them, and they were doing all this work. I mean, they could, in a blink of an eye, they could go and bring the palace, as we know, right? So God had given him so many blessings, right? And still he remained very humble. And imagine like all the jewels and everything in the middle of the ocean, the pearls. He could get all the pearls in the world. Even if he just collected all the pearls in the world, he'd be the richest person probably on earth. And imagine all the other rare earth minerals and all these things that people are crazy about, right? He could get anything he wanted, right? The only reason I would say that he didn't extract everything is because he didn't need it, right? I mean, God had given him enough, and he had more than he wanted, and he used it, in the cause of God to promote the message. And he was still a messenger of God, and spreading submission to people, and being a submitter, a servant of God himself, right? He wasn't saying that, oh, I'm next to God or anything like that. I have all these powers. Look, I can do this and I can do that. He wasn't going around and boasting about his powers and all these things that we see other human beings do. MashaAllah. So all these things were bestowed on him. So then we have, the opposite end of the spectrum with Job, and God willing, I'll read. It says, 83, it says, and Job implored his Lord, adversity has befallen me, and of all the merciful ones, you are the most merciful. We responded to him, relieved his adversity, and restored his family for him even twice as much. That was a mercy from us and a reminder for the worshippers. Also, Ishmael, Idris, Zulkifl, all were steadfast, patient. We admitted them into our mercy, for they were righteous. Jonah, and Zunnun, Jonah, the one with an N in his name, abandoned his mission in protest, thinking that he could not control him. He ended up imploring from the darkness of the big fish's belly, there is no God other than you. Be you glorified. I have committed a gross sin. We responded to him and saved him from the crisis. We thus saved the believers. Zechariah and John. And Zechariah implored his Lord, my Lord, do not keep me without an heir, though you are the best inheritor. We responded to him and granted him John. We fixed his wife for him. That is because they used to hasten to work righteousness and implored us in situations of joy as well as fear. To us they were reverent. Mary and Jesus. As for the one who maintained her virginity, we blew into her from our spirit, and thus we made her and her son important for the whole world. One God, one religion. Your congregation is but one congregation, and I alone am your Lord. You shall worship me alone. And the footnotes for verse 2190 says, the use of the plural tense throughout the Quran indicates participation of the angels. It is clear from 339 and from the Bible that the angels dealt with Zechariah extensively as they gave him the good news about John. See Appendix 10. So these verses, after Solomon starts with Job, who was at the other end of the testing spectrum, who was tested with loss of everything, right? And God fixed him, restored everything for him, and not even that, he gave him twice as much. And this, represents the two ends of the testing spectrum, right? We have Solomon on the one side, which was given all these things, and then you have Job on the other side, which was tested with lack of everything. And so, we as human beings, when we say that we are going to submit to God alone, it's not just about the lip service. We are tested, extensively, and we're put to the test by lack or abundance of health, abundance of wealth, and all types of things. But the thing that we need to understand about the admissions test is that they do not leave any permanent damage. As you can see, that with the case of Job, God restored everything for him, his family, his health, his financial situation, everything was fixed for him, and he did not lose an arm or a leg or anything like that couldn't be restored. And so all submitters, when they say that they believe in God and they worship God alone, they'll have to be tested like these people, and they go through these tests, to prove that we will worship God under all circumstances. And anybody who fails that or continues to fail that cannot be a submitter, because you have to prove that you will worship God no matter what happens in your life. Whether you get the riches or not, whether you get your problems resolved or not, no matter what happens, you're going to stick to God. You're going to be pleased with Him. You're not going to be turned into an objector. You're not going to turn unappreciative. And once you prove yourself, then there's no need for you to be tested anymore, right? And then God will fix everything. And then God says, perfect happiness now and forever for those people. And we just read another verse too, that, God says he will, well, actually, I read it this morning, sorry. But, God says he grants the believers victory in this world and the hereafter, to the believers and to the messenger, in this world and in the hereafter, right? So we must remember that. And then God gives us other examples in all these other verses, following with, Ishmael, Idris, Zulkifl, Jonah, Zechariah, John, Mary, Jesus, of all the righteous servants that God created, who all came with one and the same message, which was to worship God alone, to submit to Him alone. And especially we're given the example of the account of Jonah, that God gave him a mission. He was a messenger, but for some reason he didn't want to do it, right? And he thought that he could just abandon it. Maybe he was scared it was too difficult for him. But then he ended up suffering the consequences until he realized that he cannot, evade his responsibility. If God gave him a duty, he can't, evade that as a messenger. And so, he repented to God, and then God saved him. And then he says that, he joined the believers, and then God, gave so many other believers to him as well. And then the story of Zechariah is also mentioned here, that, when Zechariah was old and his wife was sterile, his hair was, he says in his words, flame with gray, and the bones were brittle in his body, meaning he was pretty old. And wife being sterile, it's like physically impossible for someone to conceive, right? When both the couples are old like this. But he never despaired from God despite that, and he granted him, an heir, because he didn't despair and he implored God for it. Because of that, God blessed him, and because he was righteous, God said that they implored us in situations of joy as well as fear. So they were not fair weather or bad weather friends. They were friends no matter what, right? And then they implored God, and they were righteous. So that's why God granted him John at even in old age. And then God talks about Mary and Jesus as well, right? And then the verse 92 is very important. We have one religion. The fact that God sent all these messengers and all these prophets, people think, people have all these ideas, right? But once you really truly learn the Quran, understand the Quran, it all makes sense. Like, all these messengers, they came. Why did God send these messengers? And how they preach the same message. And this is what, makes us even more comfortable, knowing that the messenger of the covenant came with the message that we should worship God alone, which is consistent with all the other messengers. They didn't want to be idolized or worshipped, and didn't say anything against God, right? And this is another sign that a person is sent as a messenger from God, because all these messengers that came throughout time, they presented this one message, and they had their proof, obviously, on top of it, to prove that they were messengers. And they never asked people for money, and they advocated the worship of God alone. So, these are all examples for us to learn from. I should probably wrap up now. So yeah, these are all examples for us to learn from. All these are role models for us. We see the people around us, and we think that, we're better than them because, look at us, like, we're not doing the things they're doing, which is fine, but it's not enough, right? And we have the bar, the standard for us as the people, the messengers and the righteous servants of God that are mentioned here, right? And we have to, use that as a standard for us, as a weighing scale for us to know where we are, And we see how God was with them, and how God supported them and showed them all the signs and everything, and so we should be at a point where, we should have similar lives to those people, and similar miracles in our lives as we see, with all these messengers and saints and prophets of God. So may God allow us, to be, just as righteous, if not more. But we could be more righteous, as the messenger says. You could be more righteous than him, right? Um, the messenger's job is just to deliver the message. So may God allow us to be righteous. And with this, I will end. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free at this point. Thank you.
MashaAllah, brother. Good job.
Immigration and tax rep. 1 second, I can't hear anybody. All right. Okay. Okay. Better. Yes, we can talk about that, brother. Let's talk about everything. God willing. Inshallah. Mhm. 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 Yeah, definitely. I mean, these examples are there for us, for us to learn from. These are, like I said, our role models that we could try to learn from. Their examples. This is why God has mentioned all these. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, also, it's important. Like, you may be thinking something in your head, but you don't want to say it, right? Like about the test, but it could also be playing in your mind. When in your mind, if you're thinking, oh, I'm not gonna be able to pass that, that's also bad. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Mhm. 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 What happened? Mhm. 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 Right. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That happens to me every day in Morocco. I came back to the US. I was like, wow, this is so amazing. Like everybody's driving in their own lane. Everybody's calm. Like, thank God. Mm, subhanallah. Okay, so any comments or questions about the verses? I know Brother Jaffer wanted to talk about this. Brother Jaffer, are you able to talk about it? Because you should talk about it. I mean, if anybody should talk about it, should be you.
Yeah, man. It's a little noisy here, so that's why I was
Right,
writing.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the main point actually is like people saying or thinking that this is from birth, and you pointed out, mashallah, that also pedophiles they would think it's from birth. But actually, there is a very logical and easy way of easy way. One second. Yes, very logical and easy way of disputing that. Like
Mm-hmm.
does someone know that something is from birth? Like because you get older and then you can't immediately express your feelings, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then most of the times, the people who think that they are homosexual from birth, they most of the times something happened to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's at least what I have heard so far from a lot of people who say
Mm-hmm.
that they had feelings like that. Certain things happen to them, and then they get this idea that this is from birth, or they want to justify this, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what we learn from the measure of the covenant and also from the Quran, of course, that um, we need to talk them out of it. We need to
Mm-hmm.
tell them that this is not from birth, and
Mm-hmm.
show them, at least ask them about, um, looking at the Quran verses and many of these things. And in one specific case, there was this person who was saying that the Quran doesn't say anything about the feelings of the soul
Mm-hmm.
in birth. It's,
Yeah.
in my point, very strange. Like
Mm-hmm.
the soul doesn't have any gender, so why would a
Mm-hmm.
genderless soul have feelings for 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 female or male? Like and we
Mm-hmm.
can see, of course, that the
Yeah.
devil is playing tricks on their minds. But I think we
Mm-hmm.
need to point out where we stand, right? That's the most important thing. And we
Yeah.
don't tolerate this, right? We don't. The
Mm-hmm.
message clearly says that you don't do good by
Mm-hmm.
giving them their so-called rights,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not doing them good as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as submitters, we are very clear that this is the path that we follow. It's the path of God, and we
Mm-hmm.
follow what's in the Quran. And when
Mm-hmm.
there are very clear verses in the Quran about
Mm-hmm.
this topic, and one of the things was basically, for example, in many verses, God tells us to marry. righteous woman, right? He doesn't say
Mhm.
that you can marry righteous men, like in the sense of talking to men, of course. That's one point. The other point is, there are so many verses that talk about the rights of women and giving them dowry. Like, if this was justified, what would you do in that specific case, right? Like, then you have here two men, like, who's gonna give the dowry to whom and why? Like, it doesn't really make sense, right? Like, so because we don't need specific verses where God says, like, you need to do this and this and this. Like, when you look at the Quran, God speaks in a way that it makes sense. It's very logical. If that would be the case, then you would have verses where God would say, like, the man needs to give the dowry to that man, or like. But this is also very. It's not even nice to talk about, like, it's a little bit disgusting as well. Sorry to say it like that, but it is,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's many verses from Quran. One thing I just want to say before I get into the verses was that for example, it's like someone who takes drugs as a child, let's say, and then he gets addicted, and then he says, no, I can't help myself, because it's from birth, but you started taking them at some point, right? And now
Hmm.
you like taking them, and you can't resist them, and now you're blaming God for it, right? And we have so many clear verses. I mean, it's not even something that we should really have to convince people of, because I mean, we just have to make a statement, let them know that this is wrong, but we don't even need to, like, prove that what they're saying is wrong. But at least we can still just show them the verses, what God says, right? And God says in Surah 7 verse 80, it says, Lot said to the people, you commit such an abomination, no one in the world has done it before, right? So imagine if people were being born that way, then they
It
would
makes
still
really
be doing
sense.
it. They would be doing it from the
Hmm.
beginning of time, right? But God says,
Yes.
it says here in the Quran, you commit such an abomination, no one in the world has done it before, you know?
Hmm.
And then this is
Yeah, it
also
would start
repeated
with
in Surah
anger,
29.
right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, Surah 29, verse 28, and so many places, and when God says, um, then why would God have to condemn it, right? Why would God have to annihilate people? If you're saying that gays are born gays, then why would God have to annihilate them? Like, God made them gays and then annihilated them, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so evil, so evil. Like, and then they put up like this fake persona of righteousness and smug, personality, and they kind of, yeah, very priestly. She comes with a smile on her face, like, when my ex-wife, when she divorced me, she came up to me, she's like, oh brother, brother, I'm so sorry for you, may God help you, and this and that. And then and then the next day she came up to me, she's like, oh brother, you should really think about it, you should delete the apps and websites and everything, all the information, all the Qurans from all the websites, and said, maybe this is why this has happened to you, why don't you look at your life, and this is why this has happened to you. And I was so shocked, uh, and I was talking, yeah, I was so yeah, yeah, yeah. And imagine like throwing something like that in someone's face who has gone through something like so traumatizing, And then I was on the phone with Huda. We were talking about it. I was FaceTiming her. I was like, "Can you believe she just said that to me?" And I said, "Why shouldn't I tell her, like, say, look at you, and why is this happening to you?" And like like 1 minute into the conversation, she literally walks in front of me. I was at the conference, and she walks in front of me in her wheelchair, and I'm like, and she starts talking to me, and I literally said it to her. I'm like, look at you. I was like, what don't you think about, why this is happening to you, And then she didn't know what to
Wow.
say, She just wheeled herself away. You just have to go.
Totally blind to,
Yeah.
wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other verses, where it says, "You practice sex with the men instead of the women. Indeed, you are transgressing people." It's not saying, "Indeed, you are born this way, so you're okay." you know. Um.
Yes.
So. Yeah, nowhere God says that people are born this way. So, like, the guy who Jafar is talking about, like, he was telling him to prove from the Quran, where does God say that people are not born that way, right? But the
Yes.
question to him would be, he should be the one trying to prove that they're born that way
Yes.
if he's coming up with this claim, right? If
Yeah.
you're coming up and telling people the Earth is flat, so prove it to me.
Prove it.
Where does God say
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Yeah, I want to ask. Yeah, I want to ask, but like, um, is this some kind of a test for us too? Like that we, that certain things happen, like, and then we need to act according the Quran, like how to deal with this type of people, or you know, or is it just like random, like, because I don't think nothing happens randomly, right? Everything is according with
Mm-hmm.
God's will. So
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about it with Mardani. Like, we were saying, what if this went go on for like months, and
Mm-hmm.
after 10 months we learn about it. That,
Mm-hmm.
after so many Friday prayers, like
Mm-hmm.
this was just the third one, I think. And then
Mm-hmm.
in the third Friday prayer, we learned
Yeah.
about it. And then
Mm-hmm.
we were saying, okay, but why did this happen to us? What was the reason for us to have that? And like, we were very careful on how we were talking, trying to be as nice as possible, as polite as possible, and try to explain, but be very open and direct, because it's and most of the times this type of people, they expect certain behavior from you, when they open to you, when they give this information, like it's like a private information. They give this to you, they trust you with this information, so probably they are expecting you to be extremely nice, right? But being direct and telling the truth, and being open and transparent, is not being um, that's not being rude, that
Mm-hmm.
is actually a good thing. Like, the bad thing would be that you're gonna justify, or like, don't worry, it's okay,
Yeah.
we're still gonna accept you. Because there are many groups that do that, right? They say, "Oh, okay, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine, as long as you are within the numbers, you're all okay to come here, we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, etc." And then eventually things happen. But we need to behave in a certain way, and we need to be extremely direct and open about every topic, actually, right? So that it's clear where we stand, that this is wrong, and yeah, that this is totally wrong, and it is the person's own decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we were thinking, was this also a test for us, like
Mm-hmm.
how we would act, or maybe for, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's it took so many centuries for the Christians to like incorporate that into their religion, and the Muslims, and here look at submitters, like we, the submitters to God alone after religion's purified, and you have all these things creeping into submission, you know, like, and then imagine like someone would come up and say like, later, say, no, no, it's universally acceptable. All the even Christians accept it, even the Jews accept it, and with the Jews also, I think some Jews will probably accept it, and then the Muslims accept it. This is a universally accepted, brother, like circumcision,
Yeah. 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 And then they will have scientific talks about it, telling that this is from
Mm,
birth, or they did some tests, and
yeah.
yeah, that makes really sense, brother. Definitely. Yeah, mashallah, and the Quran is
MashaAllah.
very clear about it. Very clear.
Thank you for brothers. It is very good study.
Mashallah.
MashaAllah.
Mashallah, brother. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you know Abdul Salam about the topic, but there was this guy who came, and then we did a few Friday prayers together. He said that he was a submitter, and then eventually he told us that he was homosexual, and then he expected us to accept this, and that this is from birth, all that kind of stuff. And then we were immediately very direct about where we stand, and that this is wrong. And then eventually um, it stopped. We don't have communication anymore with him, because he kept on keeping saying that this is that we couldn't give him evidences for, while we showed them so many verses from the Quran that were very clear about that topic. So also, and I don't know how they stand in the Turkish submitters groups in Turkey. You know, like most of them, I think they accept this. They say, yeah, it's all okay. You know, but it's definitely wrong. What
Turkish
was it?
groups? Which Turkish groups?
Mm, I think so.
No, which Turkish groups?
Sorry.
Which Turkish groups?
Yeah, you have this Turkish group, right? Like, but they are now separated
No, but you're saying they're
because they.
also accepting that?
Yes,
Yeah,
they
they,
accept
they
hypocrites, brother. They also accept hypocrites.
No,
Like,
but I
why
mean,
wouldn't they
like,
accept?
I thought you were saying that this guy was saying that it's someone in the UK or something.
Oh yes, there was also something in the UK. They have a Discord group, and then yeah, basically he told me, yeah, like there's another brother in the Discord group who made more. He did more investigations on this topic, and then
Investigation.
can you talk to him? And I said, okay, let's talk. You know, like yeah, research. Sorry, I said he did more research about this topic, and said so. I was thinking like all those Quran verses are very clear. Like you don't really need to research. But okay. And then eventually he ended up not giving me his contact, or we didn't end up having a talk with that guy from UK, who
Uh-huh.
supposedly had some evidence that it is from birth, or I don't know, like.
Uh-huh.
But he ended up not coming. Like it's very vague. So, but there are these groups that accept it. You know, they say it doesn't matter what you are or what you think. You can be
Mm-hmm.
even a hypocrite and still come, and we won't say to you, "Don't come to the
Mm-hmm.
studies anymore." You know, like
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And what happens eventually? What happens when you have that type of groups who don't have a firm stand in accordance to the, you know, the way of the Quran, right? The submission, the truth. Eventually it all breaks after a certain point, you know, with so many people with different backgrounds, and you can't accept everything. Like it doesn't make sense. Like how can you accept a hypocrite knowing that that person is a hypocrite, and then keeping it in the group? Like it's also, you know, I find it very sick. It's
Yeah.
really like how can you go to a group where you know there are hypocrites, and you're gonna talk with them, laugh with them, you know, maybe eat together with them, be friends with
Mm-hmm.
them? Like it's so strange. And those people calling them submitters, it's like yeah, like they shouldn't even dare to call themselves submitters. Definitely not, because they
yeah,
aren't. This is not
classic
Mm-hmm.
submission.
hypocrite.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Unfortunately, I saw another application from Turkish people. They built another application. They said we have another translation. Even they don't accept their translation.
Uh,
The
you're
translation,
saying
which one?
you mean a deep translation or something like that, or you mean like English
No,
translation?
no, the application is a new. He said I built another application, which is my new translation. They separate each other now.
Oh,
So
the Turkish people.
yeah, they were an
Oh,
application, but now
Uh-huh.
they built another one.
Uh-huh.
yeah. The first translation was very bad, brother. That's why,
Uh-huh.
you know, and I think more people have seen this, you know, and we pointed out this one too. You know, it was very bad. It was not a very
Uh-huh.
good translation. So eventually they were forced, I think, to do the translation over again. That's maybe
Uh-huh.
what brother is saying,
Uh-huh.
and then they get also separated with that, I think.
Mm. Okay, so are there any other questions about the verses that we read?
Yeah,
Right
brother.
away.
Maybe we can talk a little bit more about, you know, the five times prayers, and you give the example of you know, the so-called hadith where Prophet Muhammad did
Mm-hmm.
um, where he talked with Moses, and then Moses told him go back to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because this is a very well-known story in the Sunni world. or maybe in Shia as well. I don't know exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest tricks that the devil did is most people think, even in the Muslim countries, they think that five-time prayer started with Muhammad, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't start with him. It started with Abraham. But most of them, they believe it didn't because of this story. This is a very known story, is being told in the whole Muslim world, in the mosques.
Mm-hmm.
From childhood, we have heard this story so many times. And when you basically talk about it, when you think about it, logically, that Muhammad goes to Moses, and then Moses says, go back to God. From 50, it starts going to 10, 15, 5. Eventually, Muhammad saying, okay, I'm too embarrassed to go back now. Like, it's a very strange
Uh-huh.
story, but people still
Yeah.
believe in it. That's also something
Yeah.
very strange. I think it's a little bit psychological that when
Yeah.
you make up this very unbelievable story, because it's really unbelievable, people still gonna believe in it because it has to do with religion, it has to do with beliefs. I think that's the main reason why people still believe in it. um, but five-time prayer, it really started with Abraham, and we have, of course, also the mathematical evidence, the multiples of 19, that are connected to the five-time prayer. That we would point that one out. And mashallah, this is also a great blessing from God. The first times in my first periods of submission, I didn't know the connection between the mathematical miracle and the five times prayer. So I just prayed, and I was also not in this group. In the Quran studies. So I was doing my own research, trying to find out. And until I found out that this was all mathematically structured, also the five times prayers, the rakats, everything, I was just praying two rakats for every prayer because I didn't know. And I didn't want to keep doing the same prayers that I have learned in the mosques from my parents, because of that exchange from Sunni to submitter. You know what I mean? Like, I was afraid. I was thinking, this is already wrong what we are doing. So until I find out what the exact way of prayer is, I'm not gonna follow the traditional way of doing it. And mashallah, God didn't he kept everything. He made everything perfectly. The miracle is very perfect in that sense, that it gives you assurance that every prayer that we do, the rakats, the fatihas that we are reading, even reading it in Arabic, that this is really amazing, because when you stand in front of God and like you are in contact with him, knowing that you do it exactly right, it gives you this amazing feeling. We know that this is the right way of doing the five-time prayers, and it's connected with the miracle. That's also very, very good to have. So we don't have to rely on these stories that are made up. MashaAllah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if anything, I think that story shows you, how you can haggle when you go to a market, where people are selling overpriced items, you talk them down.
Yeah,
Actually,
and
uh,
First it was 50, then he went to 40, 45, then 40, then 30, then 20, then 10, and finally, it was sold for 5.
brother, the strange thing is that they think that hard work is more good deeds for them. They forget that God told us, I made religion easy for you. But they think the more you pray, the more you get credit.
Yeah, reduce the price, reduce the uh it by what, 95%?
it's a lot, 95%. Yeah.
They are good at uh, the things which is made extra for religion, but they are not good to follow the verses of Quran, which is clearly that made for us easier.
Yeah, that's why.
Unfortunately, they
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, brother. I was just gonna say, that's why when you go to these Muslim countries, you have to haggle with these people, like in Turkey, Morocco, all these places, Pakistan. From this- yeah, yeah.
Brother Suleman, I have a question for the submission app. So, according to the submission app, uh, when the pray times come, I started to pray, right? Because it depends on the GPS. When I use the Sunnah application, uh, the azan is like late or sometimes early.
hmm Right. So I mean, those apps, they have multiple prayer calculation methods, right? So they may have different times depending on the settings. But for those apps too, like if you select a certain calculation method, the prayer times will be the same most likely.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
for this
yeah,
information.
yeah. No problem, man. Yeah, yeah. Speaking of the prayer times too, I think I've mentioned this before. It's like there are a bunch of these people from Discord also that have invented this new timing for the afternoon prayer based on their misinterpretation of a sentence in one of the prayer booklets, and they've innovated this new timing which is making people pray at the wrong times or miss their prayer and pray too early or pray too late, between their noon and afternoon prayers. And they're telling people that, don't use this app and don't join these people because they do the afternoon prayers wrong or at the wrong time. They're talking about us. And I mean, it's so funny because you look at the prayer times of all the Muslims, even Shias and Sunnis, all sects, all subsects, they all do the afternoon prayer at the same time, no matter which calculation method you use. And these guys came up with their own. So, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Imagine, yeah, imagine like the messenger never said that the Muslims do the prayers at the wrong time or I have a new calculation method. In fact, I even saw the I, about the units of prayers, about units. Yeah. That has been preserved. Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, but the timings, yeah, the timings in that sense, at least for the afternoon prayer, it's been preserved, right? But other prayers, obviously, like they differ a little bit here and there. But they still know it's like lies in the middle, right? Um, but then these guys, they took it to a different level. Like, oh, it's in the middle. It's the middle prayer. So they took like the average between the noon prayer and the sunset prayer, and they literally put it in the middle. Which doesn't work for all places because the Earth is not a perfect sphere and it's a tilt. Like literally, what that does, is that yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's not. Yeah, yeah, because that's a very good point actually, because God says when the sun declines from the highest point at noon, you do the noon prayer and then the afternoon prayer, right? So the afternoon prayer, it has to be based on your location, based on the position of the sun in relation to you, right? And that varies depending on which point you are on Earth, because the Earth is not a perfect sphere. And also, the Earth is circulating at a tilt. You have in the summers and the winters, that also varies. So, but this calculation that they've done, it oversimplifies the whole problem of calculation in this way, and they just do, yeah, just put it right in the middle. So that may work in some places, but other places it varies by even more than 20 minutes. So yeah, so that's important to know, like, so if anybody, uh, I guess it's good to be informed, because when I first heard it, they were saying, "Oh, these people do their contact prayers wrong." It threw me off. Like, what do you mean? I never heard about it, and they never even talked to us or debated with us about it before that it was brought to my attention. If you guys remember those people on Discord, yeah, Discord, yeah, yeah. It's also, yeah. Mhm, mhm, yeah. Mhm, 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 mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, thank God that He keeps us protected from all of this nonsense, because I don't, and see, the thing is, like, these are real people that, some of them also have their own communities of physical, congregations. A lot of these people. So, like, the problem itself, obviously, Discord is just a platform where these people congregate, right? And the circumcisionists also have their own, like, Discord server, just like these people. And then these people have their own, and then the people who divided, then I believe there are like three or four groups now, in that Discord servers they have. And so all these people, I mean, it's not a problem with Discord, like, it's the problem with these people that are coming into submission, and they're not I think they're not ready for it, because obviously, Satan is playing with them, and they're very easily swayed with, obviously Satan has a plan to, derail all of these people, and they are put in these environments with these people who make them believe that they're on the right path with whichever nonsense they come up with, and they promote it around to each other, and they don't really pay attention to the Quran when they read it. They're more interested in impressing each other. And Mhm, mhm. Mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I wanna. Yeah, I have like an off-topic, sort of related to this, but it's still kind of off-topic question. Or just I want to hear other people's opinion. But I'll wait till we're done with the questions about the verses and comments, and then I want to bring that up, God willing. Since we brought the Israel stuff, also, it's not about Israel, but it's kind of similar. So can we go into off-topic now? Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, like, I wanted to share, like, we talked about Israel and how these people were saying this stuff, and then, like, yesterday I heard a sermon too, and, this person was talking about the war, and I mean, the sermon first began by saying that we're submitters, we're not from Iran or we're not from the U.S., we're submitters, right? But then it talked about how the people in America and Israel are fighting for power and everything else, but then the people in Iran, uh, they believe in God, even though they're idolizing, but they don't know, but they believe in God. And it says people are, you know, I didn't quite understand that part really, but like they're saying that people in the streets of Iran, they have all these rockets, and I think he saw it on TV or something. He's like, they're sending all these rockets, and when they're sending these rockets, previously they used to mention other names, but now I see when there's firing these rockets, they fire every rocket one by one, and only thing they say is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and then the rest of verses were talking about how God supports the believers, and talking about verses about war. And I'm just like thinking, like, isn't that, I mean, knowing first of all, like, how idolatrous and oppressive, the whole setup is, the country is. I mean, they're, it's like an Islamic, Shiite extremist government, right? I mean, orchestrated or not, but it is what it is, right? It's nothing submitter like, I mean, given that there are submitters in Iran, right? But there are submitters in the United States too, So, but the thing is, like, how can and also, like, one can argue that even like what you were saying the other day, even the U.S. Army is telling their soldiers that they're fighting for God, that they're saying that Jesus chose him or something, right? Anointed. Whatever, so for the Armageddon. So there could also be people that are fighting based on their belief, right? But you can't, like, I was just the whole sermon, I was just so confused, and like they had other issues they were debating with, like I didn't even want to bring it up, you know, and I was just very, very confused, and I just want to hear other people's. I guess, I mean, it's kind of clear already, but like I don't know, like. Mhm, 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 mhm. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, yeah. Mhm. Right. Yeah, I mean, at first, like I was thinking, well, maybe okay, they're talking about it because like, the people in Iran, there are submitters there too, But then, like the part when he says, "Oh, they're firing rockets, and every rocket they're sending, they have thousands and thousands of them, and China is supporting them. And when each rocket they're sending, you know, they're saying Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." And I'm thinking in my head, like, well, yeah, I mean, Allahu Akbar to them is like a war cry, you know, and it's like you're talking about it in a sermon, like, and it's like. Oh my God, like I mean, like I was just trying to not like, overreact, like, or just show my annoyance like during the sermon. It was just really, really off-putting. Because it's like saying like one person can say, well, God supports Israel, and then you have another person now saying like, okay, God supports Iran. Like, and when they said this thing about, oh, China is sending so many their ships and stuff, like I think they sent them a lot of drones, right? So it's like China is sending them, and then he's recite the verse about God says, he will support them with 10,000 angels, that verse about, isn't it enough? And then I was just, yeah. Mhm. I mean, they weren't exalting China. They were saying that they're saying China. Yeah, yeah. They're saying that they're saying that China sent all these thousands of drones, and then they were reciting verses about how God's said He would support the believers with thousands of angels. Yeah, so- yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that's yeah. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's why I posted when this whole thing started. I and in their WhatsApp group, you're in that same WhatsApp group too, right? I posted I posted the preface from the book Quran, Hadith, and Islam, right? Where the messenger says it's in the beginning of the book. It says victory, health, wealth, peace of mind, and perfect happiness are absolutely guaranteed by God for those who follow His guidance. And puts many verses in parentheses. Yet we witness 3 million Israelis consistently defeat 150 million Arabs. We witness India consistently defeating Pakistan. We witness Russia readily invading Afghanistan. And it says the quote unquote Muslim countries are the poorest, most miserable, least developed, and most tyrannized countries on earth, right? So that was my whole point also, to explain that, these things are happening, nothing good is happening because these people are idol worshippers, and that's why they're being tyrannized left and right, and they're not gonna see God's victory. That was my point. um and I Yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, and the thing, yeah, and the thing is, like, with the way the Quran studies are structured, it's very hard to discuss these things too. So maybe, I mean, I'll just probably write a response, there's no other way for me to even present my point of view on this. So I'll just maybe, I think I'm going to prepare a response and explain my views on it, because I have a sermon too next week, but I don't want to, waste the whole sermon on this topic. Have to talk about other things. But I'll just write a post about it because I just think it was like way off. Hmm. Yeah, sermon, because I mean I have so much things I want to mention in the sermon. Other things, like how to pray. In the Night of Destiny, Ramadan, not Ramadan, but like Night of Destiny specifically, because it's just day before 2 days before the Night of Destiny. God willing. Anyways, thanks. You know, because like even the person, sorry, my hold on, my prayer alarm went off. So like even you know, the person who's leading the prayer, you know, they're saying the whole prayer out loud. Like even when they're prostrating, they're saying it out loud, and um uh, bowing, they're saying it out loud. In one point. Yeah, and then that part I want to discuss. Yeah, that part I wanted, because you know the messenger also says, you know, you say it silently when you're prostrating or when you're bowing down, and then also you know, especially you know, all the women I've seen, you know, none of them. Yeah, they say quietly, they say silently, you know. Yeah, but you know, he was saying it out like loud, like audible enough, you know. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, because it was promoted by certain group in the beginning, you know. So I think they're all following each other on that. And then also I've seen that all the women in the back, like the men are sitting down. Some of them, few are sitting on chairs, but all the women are sitting on chairs. You know, not a single woman is sitting down. They just sit. They just come use the prayer rug for the actual 2 units, but not during the sermons. You know, so I think I need to mention that as well. You know, 'cause that is in a clearly an innovation. Hmm. All right. Any other off-topic questions? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then a lot of these people are not even you know, uh having their own like night of destiny. Also, like they're going to the join the group of you know, the Mustard Tucson followers, you know, who don't accept insurance. I mean, who accept insurance, and you know, says messenger has opinions and all that stuff, you know. And they're going to yeah, we can talk about that later. Yeah, yeah, God willing. Yeah, anybody has any other off-topic questions, or on topic even? I guess it doesn't matter. Uh-huh. Here's what? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, the soul wasn't allowed to basically return to the body, you know. Yeah. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. I don't know, John. How can I answer that? Yeah. Yeah, we're in the yeah. Yeah, yeah. We're the only thing I can say for certain is this: the God, puts us to sleep. When He puts us to sleep, the soul leaves, and then the soul returns when we are resurrected again when we wake up. God controls it, right? God controls. Yeah, it's not up to this person to take the soul wherever they want. Right, for example, right? Yeah, actually, speaking of that, I remember the messenger of the covenant once he was talking about this thing about yeah out of body thing. Actually, after I should go back and listen to it sometime. Mashallah. Yeah, subhanallah. Yeah, I mean, I forgot about the study today. And I mean, I remembered the study before I went to sleep. And I set my alarm before I went to sleep. And then I don't know. I think I heard the alarm one time. I wasn't sure, but then, like in my head, like I had no idea that the study was on. And then I woke up like 10 minutes. It just happened to wake up 10 minutes before the study. I'm like, oh wow. I just. Uh huh. Sorry, what was that? Mhm. Uh huh. Sorry, I didn't get that. So the first one, what in the study? Oh, I was. Yeah. 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 Usually you're the first one to join. No, because the reason is, the reason is because the calling function was not working before. So when I get the call, I immediately answer. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, maybe we have some. We should have some sort of prize. Whoever joins the study first, gets a prize, and then everybody would join on time. Right? Yeah. Uh, yeah. Yeah. We could gamify that in the app. Just give people points. Yeah. You get a $5 gift card or something. Yeah. If you were the first one in all the studies, then you get a $5 gift card from Amazon. All right. So I guess if there are no other comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. All right. So thank you
I
all
am
for
good,
joining
brother.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you, mashallah. Thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam. Bless you, bro.